Hey, this is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights and expert comments from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies like Unilever, L'Oreal, M&S, Pret, and WPP, just to name a few. We focus on 6 key areas of marketing: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data and analytics. So if you were looking to upskill yourself or your team for just 2.5 hours each week and get access to a network with our industry's giants through our live sessions, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show. And welcome to another episode of the Places We'll Go show. Now today, we really have another fabulous guest for you on the show, Kristof Fahy, the current Global Chief Marketing Officer of MoonPig. Now, for all of you who may not know MoonPig, the very few I'm sure, they're an online gift and card company and actually a constituent of the FTSE 250 as well. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Kristof. So his marketing pedigree is really second to none. He was named one of the top 100 marketers in the UK by Marketing Week recently, and he's held the top marketing job at organizations like William Hill, Telegraph Media Group, and Ladbrokes Coral Group as well. So really is an absolute veteran into the industry. I would also say that Kristof is an incredibly astute and commercial marketer. He knows how to bring a brand to life, and he's done so to a T at MoonPig, from the iconic logo, the jingle, and even the characters. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about that, as well as what makes Kristof tick along the way and into the journey. So on that note, Kristof, it's with absolute pleasure that we get to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, yeah, likewise for me, Kristof. Fantastic to have you here. I love MoonPig. And I guess you're in a business of joy, which must be great because there's many that aren't in these times. So there you go. Fabulous to have you on. So how's 23? How's it shaping up? How are you doing so far?
Good. I think it's like on a work level, it was like obviously peaks are really important to us. So Christmas is a busy time for us at MoonPig, and not hugely helped by our friendly Royal Mail strikes. Obviously, as we send quite a lot of cards through the post, so that made for a kind of interesting Christmas. And then I think what's interesting from our business is we pour out of Christmas, we go straight into Valentine's Day, straight out through to Mother's Day, and straight into Father's Day. So we have this kind of half of the year where it's quite. I'd say hard. It's fun, right? Like it's what we do is we do a lovely thing, right? So I think that's really important. But you've got quite big targets against you. You've got quite a lot of work. You're coming out of one peak straight into another. So it's quite a hard half of the year. So look, we're in it. Peaks, I think we call it peak. Obviously it's peak, but it's busy. We like it. It gets people together, and people can focus pretty hard on delivering some quite strong commercial targets, which is good. So I like that. And then on a sort of personal level, I had a super nice break. Got off, went to Cornwall, looked at the sea, went for nice walks with the dog, and just sort of had a bit of a breather because knowing we come back in. So not only from a sort of work perspective, we got these peaks. We also go straight into budget as well because our budget year is April. So we you sort of have this twin track of like peak budget, and you're like, oh my god! So it's quite punchy at the beginning of the year. So yeah,
it sounds almost overwhelming. Yeah, sounds almost relentless in that sense, particularly for H1.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I suppose I've worked in businesses, and I've realised along the way that I like businesses that move at pace. I think that's one of the things that sort of has attracted me to, and so I think I probably really landed in that when I sort of went into the world of betting and gaming, right? Because it's incredibly fast paced. Because obviously, on any single day, you've got X number of horse races, you've got X number of football matches, tennis. I mean, you've got multiple events, and effectively you're trying to market, not all of them, obviously, but you're trying to take to customers that there's lots of opportunities. So, and of course that's 24/7 now, because you obviously, if the UK stops racing, South Africa's started, or Australia started, or the States has started. So it's literally So you kind of realized you were always on. But actually what I loved was the pace, and I loved the thinking, and I loved the ability of having to make quick decisions and maybe not making the right ones all the time, but you just had to kind of go left or right, let's go, and then quickly learn and then move on. And I think that's what I really liked. And then so when I got to MoonPig, I really liked it because we're selling cards every day, we're selling gifts and flowers every day. We have some days that are busier than others, and we have some days that are smaller than others. And then we have these peaks. So you're kind of going like that, and then it goes up, and then it comes back down. But we're open 24/7, right? And we print and send cards every single day. So there's no off time is the wrong phrase, but there's no time we're not working, or there's no time that people aren't working in a business and we're not doing great things for customers. But you have to then pick your times to like fully engage, and then find times to switch off, because if you were an extreme workaholic, I think you could be you could be working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day without actually that being that hard. So yeah.
Fascinating to hear. Just as you're talking, like there's raw energy that comes through. It's clear you like pace. It's interesting you talked about that sort of almost forces you to make instinctive decisions. So I'm going to jump right in. What are some of the sort of the best quick fire decisions you've had to make?
I think one of the most recent ones was so on my journey to sort of getting the job at MoonPig, like you obviously talk to people when you're going through the interview process, and I remember sort of watching my son play rugby on just I don't know, it was a drizzly Sunday morning, I think, on some sort of muddy field in Teddington, and this guy said, "Oh, how are you going?" I said, "Oh, I'm going for this job at MoonPig," and he literally just sang the jingle at me. I went, right, that's good. And then this other person went, "Oh, I know that jingle," and they were singing the jingle. And then when I landed at MoonPig, I was like, "Cool, like what we're doing with the jingle?" "Oh no, we stopped using it. We switched it off like 12 months ago. There was some research done that showed it wasn't effective." I'm like, so 2 weeks in, I was like, "We're bringing it back." So we brought it back. I'll just put it on everything. I mean, this is not a technical term, but I put on everything I could. Like I just sort of like radio re-recorded the ends and then we had an all hands at that point because we were all in the office. And I stood up at the all hands and I said, "Look, just, "Hi, I'm Kristof. Been here a couple of weeks. Just wanted to say, we're going to bring the jingle back." And everyone applauded. There was this, like, people clapped, and I was like, something's happened here. Like the marketing team I think they did some great work. So it's not, I feel like they lost a connection with a key brand asset that the business had. Now, obviously, as I'm sure, you guys know, and this is one of my sort of pet sort of, I don't know, soapbox themes to my team is we obviously hear that jingle a lot, like a huge amount. And of course it becomes quite like, it's got an earworm effect, which is the point of it, right? So I think people can get bored of their own brand assets quite quickly, and they're constantly looking to tweak them and change them and add a load of value. I was like, we'll bring the jingle back. So that was my first 2 weeks quick instant decision, and it was great, and it stuck. And then we did a really nice thing internally, which is we wanted to re-record it. So we ran a competition internally, and we found we had this amazing singer in the business. So she recorded it. So it wasn't now. She's moved on to another business, but so that was lovely. So our jingle is actually sung by a MoonPig employee, which was great. She's called Roxanne. Brilliant. She's got a great voice. So that was another nice little thing of just tying the business back in. And then the other thing I did was bring these things back. So I brought the MoonPig back, but reinvented it. So again, they got rid of the asset. And I was like, we've got an amazing name, right? We've got this amazing name, MoonPig. We had this little asset. It was old and it needed tidied up, but they've done this whole video. You can still find it on YouTube of retiring the MoonPig. Like it's kind of sort of almost putting the MoonPig in a retirement home. So I brought it back. I mean, we reinvented it, and again, like just on a sort of technical level, the ads tested incredibly well, much better than any other ads we'd ever done. And then on a kind of almost emotional level with customers, we've had so much response. So that's why we now actually make these and sell these. And then internally, people loved it. So it did a nice thing across. If I was sort of post-rationalizing it, I'd probably draw a nice triangle on a piece of, on a Google sheet or a PowerPoint deck and sort of say that I thought about that all before, but I hadn't. But it was just in my head was, let's bring back the core assets. And now we've just got this great thing, and we use it everything, and we dress it up in avocados, and I've got the heart one, which you can't quite see, and it's great. So yeah, I think those are sort of nice decisions I've made. And then I think, if we're being kind of open and honest, then you have to make harder ones, right? Sometimes about people and roles and where you're going to focus. And I think some of those things were interesting. And I think across my career, you've found those things where something isn't working or someone isn't working, and they may be right, but it's the wrong place. And I mean, just when I was at Hills, I brought so when I joined Hills, the idea of customer research was really, I would have put it, alien, because the view was so lots of the senior management had worked at Hills all their life, right? So the average tenure was about 22, 23 years. And a lot of them had started in shops, right? So they were like, look, there's nothing we don't know about customers. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a slightly tough journey. Anyway, I managed to persuade them to get a researcher in. So we got this amazing person in. Anyway, she was from Betfair. She was brilliant, but she was too much too early. If that makes she's an incredible communicator, knew her craft incredibly well. But I learned a lesson then that it was almost I needed to kind of run in baby steps is how I put it. Of like I'd sort of gone and got someone who people like me and you would be used to working with at a research level, so like strong communicator, heavily database, but with quite strong opinions about what we should change. And it was just too much too early. So I kind of reset it and then sort of ran in baby steps, and then ended up with a great strong research team who are actually. They happened to come with me when I left to go to Ladbrokes, and they're still there. So it's a great sign. But that kind of just a learning of like understanding the pace of the business and the amount of change you could put in that was successful without trying to almost. It's almost like having an organ rejected, and I know that's a terrible analogy, but like there's a piece around. I always said my journey at Hills was I was an organ that was transplanted, and they started every day with, when I first started, they started with this many pills. And then even at the end, they were still taking a few just to make sure. So it was okay. So yeah, it's kind of, there's been some interesting decisions. I feel like I've dribbled on then, but anyway, hopefully that's useful. So.
Hey, no, not at all, Kristof. I mean, really fascinating stuff. And picking up on the first part, I mean, Byron Sharp will probably be proud for listening to this. I mean, really classical, brand distinct assets, and as you say, bringing some real zest back into the organization. And I once heard this lovely quote that said, most of the answers lie in the past, and perhaps your ability of reinvigorating things was really part of that magic. I don't know if you recently saw the. Go on.
No, it was I mean, again, what I've always, so I'm a big believer that the business knows the answer, right? And it may not be the people who sit around the exec table or leadership team, and to be honest, often it isn't, I think. So, but I think in the business you will find people, and certainly where people have a longer tenure. So both probably Hills and Ladbrokes is a place where I've worked with large retail sort of footprint. 2,000 odd shops, 14, 15,000 odd employees. In those teams are answers, right? And again, I remember, I think, doing a shop visit at Ladbrokes, and I was talking to a manager, I think it was actually in Bristol, and I was saying that none of our promotions are working. They don't seem to be drawing any other customers in. And she was going, well, that's simple. It's simple because the way it works, she said, is you have a thing saying, let's call it like win 50 grand on a poster, just as an example. She goes, my shop has got the same people in most days, so between 20 and 50 people in most days, right? And they're roughly the same. Like think of it as a local pub, right, without the alcohol. And she was like, they don't think they'll ever win that 50k, so they never enter. She said, if you make it, someone in this shop will win £100. She said, everyone will enter, and you'll get them to download the app, or all the things that we were trying to do, build a database, all those kind of good things. I was like, so literally, I went back. So William Hill was the marketing team, were mainly based in Leeds. So the next time I was up in Leeds, which was the next day, I said, right, from now on, every promotion is someone in this shop will win. And literally, our data and collection just went. And so that was just me asking a good question. Actually, it wasn't even a good question. It was a question. And someone just go, oh, yeah, I'll tell you the answer. But if I'd have never asked, she would have, but she knew, like, and she was there. She goes, I've known this for like 6 years, like, and no one's talked to me. And I was like, so I did, like, one of my things I loved was doing shop visits, because actually I always used to just go like, what are we doing wrong? What's not right? Why isn't that work? Do you think this, we signed Robbie Savage when I was at Hills, and it was like quite, he's a black and white, kind of salt and pepper type figure. People love him and hate him. And Marmite figure, I should have said. But, but what was nice is getting people's opinions. So it was just great. So I think that's one level. But I also think, I'm sure we've all worked with consultants who come in, Big Four. What they do, it's a great trick, obviously, is they go around, don't they? And they kind of interview everybody. And then basically someone at some point tells them something that is actually the answer. And then they represent it back and then charge you hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's a brilliant trick, right? And well done them. But so I genuinely think for 99.9% of the time, someone in your business will know. And it's a question of extracting that and finding a way of getting it out of people, because sometimes people won't feel confident, or they don't know, or they don't get talked to, or they just don't have a route. So,
yeah. What you've just talked there, Kristof, is the core skill of marketers, which is often the answer lies within, or the answer is hiding in plain sight, and you've got to have that curiosity to find it and asking the right questions. What I want to do now is go back and understand what shaped you into the Kristof Fahy that we know today. So tell us a bit about growing up, some influences along the way.
God, that's a lovely question. So I would 100% call myself I've called myself two things in the past: an accidental careerist and both an accidental marketeer. So I was born in London, grew up in Edinburgh, Bristol, went to university in Leeds. So I did English at Leeds, loved it. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did English because I liked it, and which was great. And I'm in the process of talking to my kids about A-level choices and all those things, and I'm like, I just went because I did something nice. And I remember walking through the one of the halls in Leeds, and I found out afterwards, which is just a terrible thing, really. And there was all these stalls up with company names on. I was like, what's that? Anyway, it didn't stop. I just walked through. I was going to say I went to get a coffee. I didn't. I went to get a pint, and I was like, what's that going on? They said, oh, that's called the milk round, and that's where you go and talk to companies about jobs after. And I was like, oh, I said, is it on tomorrow? They were like, no, it's been on all week and it's finished. I was like, oh. So I think that was one of a little mistake I might have made. But in terms of shaping me, I actually left Leeds and I did the thing that actually got me into marketing, to answer your question, and influenced me a lot, is I had a family friend who ran a charity called the National Playbus Association, and they basically converted old buses and took them around playgrounds, estates and stuff, and gave people opportunities to play and paint and do puppet shows. It's a cool thing. And they said, look, we need to raise some money. So I ended up setting up a charity bus pool on an old runway in Bristol. And it was proper cold calling, never done anything really didn't know where to start, but managed to pull it off. Got 12 teams from some big companies in Bristol, like Rolls-Royce and Royal Mail and people like that. And I managed to get the local radio station to come and cover it. And I kind of went, oh, okay, right. This is fun. I like this. And we raised, £10,000. It was a good amount, but it was fun, right? It was really good. And I loved it, but they couldn't pay me any money. And then there was a building job needed at the house where I was living with my mum, and she volunteered me to the builders because they were a labourer short. So she volunteered me. Anyway, 18 months later, I was still working as a labourer for this building firm. And then the weirdest thing, I was sitting down, literally having a cup of tea with one of the guys there one day, and he said, oh, I know a guy who runs a little design agency in Bristol. I was like, all right. Because I don't think you should be doing this, I don't think you should be doing this building thing. I think you should go and meet him. And then literally the following week, I was doing 3 days on a building site and 2 days at this little design agency in Bristol, writing Bristol City Council's housing newspaper. Oh, yes. 4 pages of housing fun. And anyway, I realised I loved it, and talking to people, and back to your point, Mark, around curiosity and how could we do this better? And that sort of, I fell into it, but I loved it. And I just had that sort of, I did proper interesting start. So, whilst I've met other people who've done the sort of P&G and Unilever school of marketing, I did the getting the boss sandwiches, picking up the phone, photocopying, washing his car, and getting a bit to do some account management and copywriting at the same time. And then that started my kind of definite passion. And then just through some interesting things that happened or some opportunities, kind of, I suppose, got to, I don't know, where I am now, if that's a phrase. But yeah, in terms of the influence, look, I think one of the things that's interesting, I was reflecting on this the other day, is the bit I wish I'd known more, I think at the beginning of my marketing career, was business principles, right? So my mum was an art teacher and my dad, they were separated when I was quite young. So, and my dad was like a IT guy in Standard Life in Edinburgh. So they didn't come from a kind of like commercial or business background. So I definitely went into marketing through the sort of creative comms route. That was my start, I suppose, in that way. And I genuinely think I probably made, I wouldn't say mistakes, but I could have made better decisions, or I could have made better cases for things if I'd have known some of the basic principles of business, which I've definitely learned now. But I think it would have been, I would have been a bit, I think I'd have been a bit more useful to a few more people earlier on in my career if I didn't just have a complete kind of Marcom brand identity lens on my head. But we're there now, so it's good.
What a lovely traversing story, Kristof. Honestly, and I really think about your when you said about having probably sitting down with somebody right next to you, and he just said that it's you should be doing something different, and kind of almost probably quite off the cuff in the moment, and just gave you that small in with that design agency, which took you onto a completely new path.
Well,
And it's
I
it's the
know this.
power.
Yeah, but let me tell you a story about him, because it is one of the best stories that I've come across in my life. So he was a big Irish fella called Steve. Like, you could almost go kind of classic kind of builder, right? And then but he was the only person reading the Guardian. There were 10 of us. So to be honest, half of them couldn't read, right? And he was reading the Guardian. I was like, oh, Steve, what's your story? Anyway, it turns out, and it was absolutely amazing. So he came over from Ireland, landed in Bristol, ended up building, met this amazing woman that he fell in love with, but her dad did not approve, right? Because her dad was quite smart. He was like an intellectual kind of, I think he was a professor or something. So Steve stopped building, went to Bristol University, got a first-class degree in history in like 3 years, showed it to the dad. Dad went, okay, well done. And then literally went back to this building job. And he was married to that woman. So I was like, Steve, so it was a funny conversation, because he was like, you shouldn't be here. I'm like, you shouldn't be here either. Like, neither of us should be here. And actually I bumped into him about 8 years ago, and he's still building in Bristol. And anyway, so he said, what are you doing? I said,
Steve.
I'm like, I've done, marketing. He's like, well, I always thought you weren't cut out for building. I was like, I always thought you. Anyway, it's just there's a lovely story in that about him, which actually gave him the ability to go, Kristof, you need to go off and get out of here, because otherwise I think I'd have ended up running a small building firm in Bristol. I think that would have been my other path.
Christoph, I wonder if there's a reflection here about, as you say, right, two people sitting in an environment, both describing how they both shouldn't be there, but yet one goes off to do an extremely different thing versus the other who stays where they are. I just don't know. I mean, I wonder, and I suspect that scenario might be a common thing that people experience, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, have you thought about why? I mean, why did you go off and why didn't he? And it could have been vice versa as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my view would probably be, I only took the building job because I needed the money, right? And I knew I had the marketing bug, I probably didn't even know it was called marketing then, to be honest. The thing of doing the kind of like the comms and the bus pool and doing stuff was in my head, but they couldn't give me any money, so it became quite and I don't come from a rich family or anything, so that I had to earn cash, right? So then, but I loved the building, right? I was called, I called it to someone the other day. It was a zero responsibility job, right? So you got picked up at 8, and then you mixed some cement and you put some bricks in and you drove a dumper truck. You finished at 4:30, and at no point from 4:30 till the next morning did I think about the job, right? It just didn't. And it's quite liberating, right? And you got paid, I got paid a check every week, and I got a nice £50 note to go and spend over the weekend. It was great. And it was, it was fun. But I think the reason I think it was Steve opened the door for me. And I think because I knew that there was something else in me, right? And I think this is the interesting thing about the drive, was I was sitting there after 18 months going, God, I think I could do this better, this building thing, right? I think the way he organizes the teams isn't right. I think the way, he was a lovely guy, the guy builder, but he was the classic halfway through a job, he would disappear. I'm sure we've all had those builders in our house. He was one of them. And I'd be like, oh, this is awful. Because people would just like cry. And you'd be like, I don't know when we're coming back. It's just awful. So I think, so there was something in me, there was a drive in me to go, Andy, the way you're running this business is wrong. And I actually had said to him about 2 weeks before, I said, let me help you run this. Like, let me sit in the office, let me work on the teams, work out, get the right materials to the right place. So there was something in, and I think what sort of Steve did is went kick and went, actually, and then I was off. And I literally I think I did this sort of 2 days, 3 days for about 2 months. And then I was 5 days in at the beginning of marketing. So yeah, that was a journey.
Very, very interesting to unpick that journey. Steve, what are you doing? Anyway, but that's a fractional career. Builder and design agency, all in one, when people talk about sort of portfolio or whatever. Very interesting, though. So I'm going to take a bit of a detour. So you wish you knew more about business principles. So we didn't say it in the intro, but you were in the inaugural year for the Marketing Academy Fellowship, which is a great program. I've done it myself, which is to mark a path from CMO to CEO, and really does allow marketers to expand their skill set beyond marketing and into the boardroom. So was that a pivot moment for you? And 10 years on, how do you reflect on that as putting a big commitment into your personal development?
Yeah, I'm scared it's 10 years, but that's quite scary. I loved it, right? And I fought tooth and nail to get on that first course, because I think I was at that point. I needed to do more, and I needed to understand more, definitely. And there's a bunch of people I knew had gone off and done MBAs, and I kind of flirted with that, and I hadn't done it, right? So I was like, right, I've got to get exposed to this stuff more. Like, obviously, I think I was at Hills at the time. And of course, but I think by that point, I definitely developed a lot of commercial business skills. I wasn't in the same place, but I just wanted exposure to more things, and to be challenged a bit. And I did the application and all that stuff. And then I remember it was complicated because Sherilyn rang me and she said, there's another, because it was meant to be you could only have one person from each sector on the course, right? So because otherwise, in terms of like the sharing and she goes, well, there's another guy from a gambling company, and he's okay if you're okay. And I was like, I was fine. So it was good. But I loved it, and I came away from every one of those sessions and times away, and talks from the guys at McKinsey. Just the people just telling you stuff, and it's like, that's good. And the ability to ask questions. I think, I came out of there just a bit turbocharged. I think in terms of thinking but more importantly, probably just taking a more, I don't think, sort of structured lens to things, I think was one of the things I took out of that. Like, there was just in terms of how you thought about problems in both in the round commercially and in the more medium and long term as well. I think I'd been quite, particularly in that, as I said, in the betting and gaming world, it's quite a quick business. So you didn't really have sort of doing a long term, like, what are we trying to do with this business? How are we going to grow? And I think I came out of that just going, right, you have to get the balance right between the kind of short, mid and long. And that was really interesting. But I mean, Mark, I know you've done it. I absolutely loved it. And I think actually we talked about it when you were going through, when you were about to apply. And I think
you gave me the advice to go for it and how to go about going for it. So yeah, thank you for that. Actually, 10 years on, similarly.
yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it, and I think it was a real just gave me. I think fundamentally, it just gave me a load of tools I didn't have before, and I think that's really important. I think I've actually still got all the papers, literally all the kind of modules and stuff behind me here, and you do look at stuff. You go, oh, God, I'm sure we had a thing on that, and you've got a nice little, 6 or 7 pager that you just go, oh, right, okay, there's a way of doing that. So it's great. It's been really helpful.
Hey, wonderful. And then, of course, another big element of the marketing academies around the network and peer group that you garner from it. And I just wonder, and this is sort of perhaps a slightly wider question than the academy, but just in your experience and of your career, what extent has a peer group or a community or a mentor group of sorts really played a role in your success?
A lot, I think. It's interesting. I've worked. So I love being able to talk to people about problems, right? And I'm quite a kind of relatively straightforward, honest person, and I don't keep things to myself. So I'll talk to anyone about anything, and then I'll ask their views. I think I've been very lucky to work for 3 really good people, and they're very different, right? So there was a guy called Alex Batchelor who I worked for at Orange, who you guys probably know. He was actually on the fellowship as well, which was interesting on that first one. And he was just one of those guys I worked for Orange, and he was kind of opened my mind to how bright someone could be and how nice someone could be. And we still talk a bit, and I will run stuff past him, and he's always got a view, and he's very good at thinking and around. So he's someone I've absolutely. And then actually my boss at Hills, Ralph, who was he's classic, started at Hills when he was 18 in a shop in Glasgow, ended up running the company when he was 53 or 54. But he was probably the biggest change agent I've ever worked for. And what, it was an interesting place to work for lots of different reasons, but sometimes his perspective on stuff and his ability just to unpick things was incredible. And I think I learned a lot from that. And then, used to use him quite a lot just to run stuff past. And then actually my current boss, Nickel, is, again, just one of the kind of brightest people I've worked for. But it was interesting. We were reflecting on this the other day, actually. We had a sort of team away day. I think it took me and him a couple of months to sort of work out a good relationship. And what I've found now, which is brilliant, is I just use him as an advisor, right? So he's obviously my boss, right? And he obviously controls my pay and rations. So let's just make that clear. But he's also the kind of person I can ring up and go, Nick, I'm thinking this, and I'm just a bit worried about that. And you got a perspective, and he's great. Like I called him yesterday for 5 minutes, and I'm just like, yeah, but have you thought about it from this? Oh God, no, I haven't. Right, okay, great, thanks, and just scurried away and did some thinking and came back with a great answer, right? So I think I like, and then of course there's people. There's that kind of great kind of marketing academy WhatsApp group, which is just like a hive mind of information. I mean, you drop questions in there and you get great responses. And so I'm constantly trying to find people to talk to, and it's often people who've maybe even worked for me before, or who I've gone, look, I used to do that, and was that good, and can I change? And I think some of that stuff's been really helpful. So I love having I suppose maybe my whole thing is I can't solve problems myself, right? I have a view, I have a thought, and I'll often have quite a clear view in my head, but I desperately want people around me to challenge me, say it's rubbish, say it's half good, maybe on occasion say it's really good. I mean, it's nice to hear it on occasion. And then I'll totally swerve and change, and I will use just even the leadership team at MoonPig and previous leadership teams as just sounding boards, right? Just like, give me another perspective, because they will all come with different. Our ops guy at MoonPig is super smart, right? And sometimes you share stuff with him. He this week we're doing some stuff on processes. I had a half an hour on the phone with him, and he taught me more about processes, because that's kind of something he did at Cambridge. I was literally, it was like having a McKinsey masterclass in 25 minutes. Brilliant. And just a little nugget this week of never knew processes had more, how much thinking had been done behind them, and never had someone explain it so quickly and so sensibly to a point where I got it. And I was like, oh, okay. That was really good. So
I was going to go next to you're in a business of joy now, and gambling on the face of it is a business of joy at that moment of winning. Over the last 10 years, the sort of the social responsibility side and dealing with addiction has really grown as a thing. As you look in the rearview mirror, how did that play out in terms of understanding that there's, that ultimately it creates winners and losers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things around that. I think the gambit. I mean, one, I think if when you go into that sector, you have to feel comfortable. You have to be comfortable. And look, my granddad was a bit of a Saturday afternoon horse racing punter, so it was wasn't in the family, but it went on. And look, my thing was, halfway through the process, I went and sat actually in the William Hill in Kingston for most of the day and just drank tea. I'd go to the machines, bet on some greyhounds, and I really enjoyed it. We had a proper laugh with the people in there, and I'm like, right, I'm in. I love this. It's great. So I think that's really important to kind of test the environment before you go in. I think in my time, both at Hills and Ladbrokes, the whole sector just got so much better, right? And I think it was really helped by people coming in from the outside and going, maybe we need to do this. Maybe we need to watch that. Maybe we need to be less aggressive with that promotion at that time, right? And I think some of those things, and then also just bringing in, I think, stronger boards with better oversight was also helpful, because I think you had an industry that was, people had been in it for a long time, and therefore there'd not been a lot of outside challenge, I think. And then you had people like Betfair and Sky Bet starting up, who are much more tech-led businesses, obviously. But Hills and Ladbrokes were, they were the people who started at 18 and were now in senior manager roles. But I think where gambling's got to now, and I think it's part government, it's part regulation, but it's a lot of the industry just, I don't know, like sort of just sort of tidying itself up, polishing itself, and just making sure it's still providing a product to 99.4% of people who gamble completely responsibly and have no issue, right? And there's a very small less who develop an issue, and it's the same in other industries like alcohol or whatever it might be. But it's important to, as you say, it's important to go, how do we make sure that group have a huge amount of fun and love what they do, and how do we make sure this tiny sliver here are properly looked after and are spotted early, because the patterns are there, right? And I think that's the key thing. And actually, I think tech has been a huge part of that, because it can pull patterns together super quickly, where you can start to see behaviors that may take someone down a different path. And then it's on those companies to intervene early and also collectively as well, because that's the whole point of, if if Hills barred a customer or said you're not going to gamble with us anymore, there's another 8 companies or even 20 now given online or apps that they can go to, so that they have to work together. So I think looking back on it's in a much better place, but I think it was getting there when I was there, and I think it's really good to see that it's just got that momentum has absolutely carried on. So
Super. But thanks for that, Kristof. And look, time is running by, so I'll make this the last question. During the course of the discussion, you used the phrase "got to where I am now," and I love that. And so many things accomplished, and worked in the top marketing job over a number of companies and sectors. So I'd just like to get your point of view on, do you see yourself at some point, taking on the top job as CEO, or do you feel like marketing is where it's at and this is where you want to spend the rest of your career? Do you have a point of view on the next phases?
yeah, yes and no. It's a weird one. I think one of the great things about the fellowship was you go on that process of like thinking about what you want to do, where you want to go. And I know it was 10 years ago, and it's interesting. I think if I was desperate for a CEO title, and I'm using these words quite carefully, there have been 1 or 2 opportunities I could have taken, right? And I haven't, because they weren't right, and I couldn't be passionate about what that role was and the company. So I also absolutely love marketing. Like, I just have this thing. Like, it makes me really happy, and I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the sector, and I really enjoy the people, and I love driving commercial growth in a business through marketing. I think it's just brilliant, so I kind of not sitting on the fence. I think if a great opportunity came, I would give it absolutely my best. You're back to my kind of fight tooth and nail for it. But I'm not chasing it down because I think I want CEO after my name. So I think that's where my head's at. And so in the future, I don't know. Go on, Mark. Sorry.
No, you keep going.
No, so if I go back and say, look, I'm one of those people who didn't have a plan at the beginning, as I've probably shared this morning, and I've probably got a bit more of a plan as I went through. Right now, I love what I do. I love what I'm doing. I love the company I work in. I love the people I work with, and I'm having a great time. You never know what's around the corner, but I'm not sitting there going, if I'm not a CEO by the time, in the next couple of years, I'm going to be disappointed. That's not in my head.
Well, that was a good build, actually. I'm glad you did extend but it was an extension of the same point, which is a lovely answer, which is you love your craft, you love what you're doing, and therefore you're never going to be running away from something. You'd be running to something, and therefore it would be the right opportunity. But Kristof, what a lovely experience to hear more about you, hear what makes you tick. I'm just going to put a few learnings out, or what are some of the reflections from it, just for everybody's reflection. So we started really talking about pace. And it's hard, but it's fun. But I think you like running at pace, and how that's led you to be able to make some instinctive decisions. And frankly, two blinding ones would be to bring back Jingle and the MoonPigs as the key distinctive brand assets for the brand that you're leading. So good early wins. But then we talked a lot about how the answers lie within, and maybe in plain sight, and curiosity. And so you say you were an accidental marketer, but I think what's come through is you've got a lot of the core instincts and insights that make for a great marketer. But you might have Steve. I mean, where's Steve? You might have just become a builder. Not that it's a bad thing, but you wouldn't have gone to achieve all the amazing things you've done. Clearly, the fellowship was a pivotal year. Gave you the tools, the peer group, and the impetus and the breadth. So big shout out to Sherilyn and the Marketing Academy. I love the way you talk about your bosses. I mean, Alex Batchelor, if anybody who doesn't know him, very bright and very nice, is a great summary. But it characterizes your openness to learning from other people. Open-mindedness, growth mindset comes through. We talked a little bit about gambling and some of the balance and juggles there, but it's clear that you made the point, test the environment, but you were going to an environment you knew well and obviously excelled, and they would also catapult points for your career. But my close, and perhaps the nice point, is a reiteration of that you clearly have a love of marketing, but in a commercial way. So it's not like you love jingles and characters. You join the dots on how that drives commercial performance, as opposed to one without the other is they go together, don't they? And I think they certainly do in your head. So maybe you will go on to be a CEO in the right circumstances at the right time. But in the meantime, I think you've still got a massive amount to bring to MoonPig and to the marketing world. So thank you for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and I know everyone listening in will appreciate it. So thank you, Kristof.
Thank you. Absolutely loved it.